Welcome to our horizontal menus lab. This lab is going to be just a little bit different from the last one in the regard that I'm going to give you a few parameters for our site's menu, but it's going to be up to you to decide exactly how you want to style it. So I have two files that we're going to be working on in our lab opened up here. I've got the index.htm and the main.css opened up. You can find these in the 04_09 directory. And I want to point out that the main.css is found in this _CSS submenu. So those are the two files that you're going to be working with. Now, the instructions for this lab are at the very top of the main.css file. I'm going to go through the steps for the instructions. And as I go through some of these individual ones, I'm going to preview the finished version of the site menu so you can kind of see what your target styling goal is. So the very first thing that you want to do is browse through the structure of the HTML code, find the nav element with the ID of page nav, and really carefully look at that structure. So I'm going to show you that. In the source code, if I scroll down, you don't have to go very far, right around line 18 or so, you're going to find our site menu. Here we have a nav element. It has an ID of page nav. So we're not using a class here, we're using an ID. And then we have unordered list with all the links inside of it. So it's a fairly simple structure, very similar to what we were using earlier in the chapter. But to remember, we do have that nav element. And as you begin to write selectors, you're going to want to remember the ID of it, and you're going to want to really examine the structure so that you know how to write your selectors. Now, the next thing that you want to do is you want to scroll down and find the styles that apply to the page header H1 element. I'm going to show you the finished site layout so I can show you what I'm talking about here. The H1 is being styled as the Roo Academy logo here in the upper left-hand corner of our page layout. As you can see, the menu sits just to the right of that, nestled at the very top of the page. So obviously, you're going to need to familiarize yourself with how that header is being styled so that when you style the menu, those two items are working together. Now, to find those styles, they're in the main.css, and I'm just going to scroll down and show you where those are. Takes a little while to get down to them, but they're right here around line 216. There are header styles. There's not a lot going on there. There's only two selectors, but there's a lot of valuable information, such as the width of that H1, that you're going to need to know about as you begin styling your menu. Now, the nav styles themselves, those individual styles, you'll actually write those right here at about line 233, just below that. Scroll back up here. Now that you know the sections that you're going to be affecting and sort of where you're going to be writing your code, I want to go over the steps to build the actual menu itself. Now, unlike the previous labs where I've given you step-by-step instructions on exactly how to build it, I'm just going to give you some parameters and give you some of the values of the colors that I use. But other than that, I'm going to totally leave it up to you to style the menu the best way that you see fit. Now, these parameters are just below this. I'm going to talk about them by looking at the actual menu itself, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. But when I reference colors, if you come back into these instructions, you'll find those color values right in here for each one of these steps. You can just copy and paste those colors, or you can certainly come up with your own color scheme. So here's what you'll need to do. The menu needs to appear just to the right of the Roo Academy logo, and it needs to go ahead and stretch all the way out for the remainder of the layout. Now, this is a fixed width layout, meaning it's designed to fit a specific width, in this case, 960 pixels. You want to take a look at the body element, understand how much space you have, and then use that to determine how wide the menu should be. Now, the background color of the menu is a very dark color, almost black. The RGB value is in the steps, as I mentioned, but I'm also using an alpha setting here, which is a semi-transparency. So that's one of the reasons why we can see the background image behind it. So take a look at those. Now, if you want to change that and do something different with the menu, feel free. The next thing you'll need to do is you're going to want to space these menu items out so that they stretch almost across the entire menu. If you want to add a little bit more space or have less space, that's totally up to you. It's whatever your personal preference is going to be. But remember, you want to have at least enough room to where it's very easy for somebody to go through the menu and select them, and they know exactly what they're looking at when they do that. I used white text, and then I used that orange color for the rollover. If you want to change those, you can. I've also made all of the link text lowercase. You want to make it slightly smaller than the default text size, and it also needs to center vertically within the menu. I've also added a little bit of padding to the links so that not only do I have enough active space on either side of the link, but later on when I show you guys the current page indicator, you've got enough room to make that sort of tab look that we're going to be doing here as well. Also, you want to make sure that no background image shows up. Remember, we have a default diagonal pattern that shows up on all our links, so you're going to want to disable that for your rollovers. Also, I've got a current page indicator that you're going to need to build, and I'm just going to click through these different pages so you can see that current page indicator. It's kind of like a tab shape. So I used a background color that's very close to white with an alpha transparency, and notice that I've also changed the text color to black. I'm rounding off the top corners, and as you can see, the cursor is not displaying, so I've turned the cursor back to that default cursor for those particular links. Remember that getting this current page indicator to work is actually a two-part process. Not only do you have to write the styles for it, but you're going to have to go into each of these individual pages and apply the appropriate class or ID, depending upon which you choose to go with, for that particular page. I do realize it's going to be a little harder than your previous labs, but I really wanted in this lab for you to experience what it's like to have to plan and execute a menu within a much larger site. Don't forget, you can open up the files located in the finished files folder and take a peek at the finished code if you're stuck. And also be sure to watch the solutions movie where I explain why I wrote the menu styles the way that I did.